This is going to be an interesting talk because, clearly I'm getting on a bit. I'm going to sledge a few of my elders that taught me how to keep fish. And the reason for that is that I want people to think. Anyway, let's move on. The talk's going to happen... Hold on, let's get this moving. Okay, not that one, that one. So I'm sitting over this side because I'm a bit of a one-eyed person, and that's the screen I can see, and I need to take a few cues. That fella there is exactly the same age as me. So this is very early when Peter Unmack discovered redfin blue eyes out in the Queensland desert. And Steve Brooks and I were the first official government representatives to go out and chat to the landowner and just see what the go was. I don't know how much you folks know about redfin blue eyes, but there's heaps online. I don't want to focus on the ecology or anything like that. I want to focus on our attempts to breed it. Steve and I quickly determined that the fish was in a lot of trouble out there. Gambusia had invaded the springs, and we're going to make them go extinct. They nearly did. So we wanted to set them up in captivity. We're young, so we're at this time early 20s. Really raw. We really relied on a lot of experienced biologists and fish keepers for advice, for ideas, for the wherewithal to keep these things. So we bought some back to put into captivity. They came to Melbourne through Peter Unmack. They came to Queensland through Steve and I believe some went to New South Wales and South Australia. And that's what's upset me. That made me really cranky because the best fish keepers in the hobby failed to keep these fish in the hobby. And that really disappointed us because they're an extremely rare fish, extremely small populations, extremely unknown. I mean, why is a blue eye in the desert, for crying out loud? It was obviously special, and I personally put a lot of faith in my elders to grow this thing. In 2007, 17 years after they were discovered, a bunch of my colleagues and I wrote this paper lamenting the demise of redfin blue eyes in the hobby, and we wrote some stuff about failing to do it and what we thought was needed. And the hobbyists, Adrian Tappan is a Queenslander, a great man, well written. If you've ever seen Home of the Rainbow Fish, that's Adrian's work. It's a fine tome. And he wrote that I'm afraid we failed miserably. I mean, I didn't have a great relationship with Adrian because I gave it to him because he didn't keep my redfin blue eyes alive. And to his credit, he admitted it and he wrote this. So we move on. We learned a lot from that early captive breeding of redfin blue eyes. And, this is a talk about blue eyes, but this is a talk about all our fish. You can pick any fish that we keep that's rare. And it's either rare in the hobby or it's rare in its ecology. I don't know, let's pick one. Red laser cories. There's not many of them about. Don't assume that you will always be able to get more. The first time they come into the country may be the last time. So if we want them, we've got to look after them. So maintaining a fish like that long term, it's not a blasé thing. It requires good resources. It requires investment, money, time. It's just what it takes. Having said that, don't beat yourself up over it. A lot of people have setups that they spend days, and you be quiet. I spent a lot of time in my fish area the last 4 weeks, but that was just so I could come here. I know we're all guilty of spending a lot of time in our fish rooms, but sometimes we spend a lot of time unnecessarily. We've made things too complicated for ourselves. So a message that I want to drive home is keep it simple. Not trying to advertise any particular person. It's a good mantra though. Keep it simple. Something that we needed to do more with the early redfin blue eyes is share them. So share your success. If you manage to breed a few, get a good mate, and share it around, get a small group. One of the big mistakes we made is that redfin blue eyes were this new unique species, and everybody wanted it. And everybody fell into the trap of breeding a few and giving them to their mate that wanted some. That was the demise. We sent them overseas, we sent them to different people. We spread the population too thin. In hindsight, it's a learning. So from that, blue eyes in particular, I'm sure it applies to lots of other things, keep a large group or keep 2 large groups. And, I'm thinking 20 is your minimum number of blue eyes to start breeding with. But the more you've got, the better. So I've got 20 fish that I've bred over this season. I'm keeping them this year. When I breed 40 next year, I'll give 20 to my mate. Don't spread your population too thin. Blue eyes, they're 100-mile-an-hour fish. They're always on the go. They require lots of food. So if you're going to breed blue eyes, lots of dedication to food often. They're not too fussy about what they'll eat. They'll eat most anything. So the take-home message is, kind of morning and night. I get away with it a lot because I keep really grubby aquariums, and if I feed early in the morning, they'll find plenty to eat in the tank. It's that thing, don't be too hard on yourself. I can't keep a clean tank, I acknowledge it, but it makes my life easier and my fish thrive. Like that. If you're time poor, keep a dirty tank. Don't be fussy about cleaning it. The big thing I want you to take home is look to the fish in its natural habitat. Look for where it lives. Don't focus on water quality. Often it really doesn't matter that much. Far more important to say, where is it getting its food? Where is it finding its mate? Where is it displaying to its mate? Where is it laying its eggs? Where do the babies go when they hatch? Where do the juveniles live while they're growing up before they're ready to spawn? Bring all that together and then think about how you're going to breed your fish with that in mind. Don't focus just on water quality. It's an easy thing because we can measure it easy. The ecological side of it's a lot harder because you need to observe, you need to watch. And it helps if you've got scientists like us feeding that information out. That often doesn't happen. Often it's easy just to pack up and go for a holiday, go and look where these things are happening. Just make yourself familiar. And this is my life ethos. I question everything that I know. So everything that I am completely certain about might not be right. And I start thinking, is that the right way? Is it something a little bit different I should be doing? Am I certain I have to do a 10% water change every week? Or does 20% every 2 weeks work? Or 50% every second day? You don't fall into the trap of following rules. Question everything you know about fish keeping and maybe about life. Redfin blue eyes. This is a photo by Jason Schulder from Australian Biotopes. It's one of the best redfin blue eye photos I've seen. I've borrowed a lot of photos from mates and other people around the country because my photography skills are woeful. I haven't brought a prize, but jump up in the audience when you see one of my photos. You'll see. So, with that learning from redfin blue eyes, and from those early days in the 1990s, I didn't get a chance then, after we lost them from the hobby, I didn't get a chance to work with redfin blue eyes until 2015. I convinced I'm going to have a drink. Convinced the people I was working for, Bush Heritage Australia, that we needed a captive population. It was my main goal. Sorry. So 2016, which photos did I put in here? Just that one. I set up breeding ponds with the ideas that had grown from my anger at my elders, from experience just sitting and observing fish, of watching. And I decided that our focus on really shallow, really water quality driven habitats for breeding them was not right. And we did this. So I'm just going to run through a few of the learnings that I took from that period of anger and focused it into something much more positive. So we knew that glass aquariums, redfin blue eyes live in glass aquariums just fine. But all the breeding attempts were done in glass aquariums, and well, the result was it didn't sustain. So ponds, we thought ponds were the answer. Because they're a shallow water species, and in the wild it's not uncommon for their deepest water to be that much, maybe a couple of centimetres. So it made sense that they spawn in shallow water. So I decided we needed some spawning material close to the surface. And also somewhere for the babies to live close to the surface. Here's my comment about water quality. It doesn't really matter. The wild water is high in sodium bicarbonate, which is a very unusual water mix. We thought it was critical. Turns out it isn't, but it doesn't hurt. So sodium bicarbonate is a really good buffer, and it stops wild pH swings. When you've got a lot of plants, you can get fairly dramatic pH swings caused by your plants photosynthesising. So the sodium bicarbonate buffers that. It slows that speed at the pH is changing, but it's not super critical for redfin blue eyes. They're tougher than you think. And we didn't think they minded deep water. Discussion amongst the scientists was that they were probably once much more widespread. It's quite a fluke that they were isolated in just a few springs in the middle of the desert. They had to have come from somewhere. They probably had to move through rivers. They're probably just in shallow water because that was all the habitat that was left to them. So we didn't worry about the fact that there was deep water. And we thought that they would use it, and it turns out that they did. And so we discovered that in those ponds they'd maintain a pretty good population. 1,000 litres, you'd easily get 100 to 200 fish, and you could harvest that a couple of times a year. And this is my bit about keeping a large size. Blue eyes, redfin blue eyes in particular, are 100-mile-an-hour fish. They're always on the go. The males are probably only good for breeding for a week. They just blow themselves apart. And then they sneak off somewhere and hide, regenerate, rebuild their resources, and try and pick another territory and come in. So you need to start with a good number of blue eyes. It's important to have, so the burnout of the males, they need somewhere to go and hide. So you can't just put one male in with a couple of females. You need these males bouncing off each other, displaying, defending, firing themselves up. But like I said, they burn out. So you need somewhere safe for that male to go and recuperate. So a 1 foot aquarium, 300, 300, 600, it doesn't really provide enough space. That in my mind is enough space for a trio, maybe 2 males and 5 females, but that's really pushing it. Some of the other things we noticed is that egg laying and hatching can occur. So I measure my water temperatures in the morning, first thing, because that's when it's all critical. If I'm giving 17 15 to 17 degrees in the morning. I'm probably getting 18 to 20s during the day in my ponds outside, those ponds, and they were still breeding. So we get 9 to 10 months of the year in southeast Queensland where these things will breed, and fairly prolifically. Did I miss one? Yep. They're short-lived. So 100-mile-an-hour fish is burning a lot of energy really, really quickly. They burn out quick. So that's that thing about feeding them well, keeping them going. But it's also the thing about not keeping too few. Have lots in reserve. And you need to breed them more than once a year. It's not, well, I think that I was getting maybe 4 generations in a year in that captive breeding population. It's nothing for a 2 to 3 month old fish to be fecking, to be breeding. And that's amazing, yeah. I think the ponds provided a lot of food. There was a lot of places to hide, there was a lot of production, there was full sun, there was quite a lot of nutrients, so there was a big bio load in the water. So I didn't feed them at all, no supplementary feeding. I just let them go. And that also ties into a fact that those floating rafts that I had, I don't know if I've got another photo of those. No, this is what I'm doing now. Those ponds with the vegetation growing on rafts, they separated the water column separated, it stratified, and right down the bottom it became very foul. So I would probably have to reset, as in drain, and refill those ponds at least once a year, maybe twice a year. So that was a problem to me. So let's move on to now. And this is how I do it now. So that population I lost. And that's a way of saying that I stopped working for Bush Heritage Australia. They spat the dummy about me having captive fish, and they took them away to somewhere else. So that was my finish with redfin blue eyes. Except that working behind the scenes politically, look, I didn't have a lot of faith in Bush Heritage to keep captive populations going. I didn't see any reason they shouldn't be in captivity. So a number of us fought very hard and sometimes quite, what's the word? You ever sworn at a minister before? Caused their department a bunch of, and then it came to that. But the long story is that we got permission in June 2023 to have, and I know exactly where I was when I got the phone call from the department, to have redfin blue eyes in captivity again. That was a great moment. Hey?
It was 2023, as late as June 2023 is when they allowed it?
It was June 30th, 2023.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And, yeah. So the journey started again for me. And I thought about new ways of doing it. So this is where I got annoyed with the plants. I can't grow plants very well to save myself. But I refined the elements of what redfin blue eyes needed down to a industrial scale, if you like. And I come up with floating rafts now support a little bit of plant to look after the water quality a bit, but they also support floating koi mops. Are you aware of the koi spawning mops that you can buy commercially?
We don't have koi down here.
No, we don't have koi in Queensland. They're anathema. Buy them, Timu, Western Australia. There's a koi person over there. They're about yay long. They're monofilament twisted in stainless steel wire and make a really good spawning mop. So that's just one piece folded back and forth. This is a bit of poly pipe that floats. This is some gutter guard that holds the basis, makes a really shallow area. The filaments hold the eggs really well. The babies can hide amongst the strands as well. So that's my plant replacement. And I think further on we'll show you more about that. But there's a red-fin blue-eye egg, and there's the babies. And I'm not really sure why we call them red-fin blue-eyes. I think we should have called them yellow blues, because that's a juvenile blue-eye. They're really, really pretty, yeah. So here's some observations. So I got some blue eyes recently, and I've bred them under this. And they're different to the ones that I bred from the wild. I suspect they've been in captivity a lot longer. I'm wondering if any of you guys have had them a lot longer and haven't said anything. But they appeared on the market, great. But they definitely seem to be different. The males are no longer as 100 mile an hour. They're not as aggressive. They don't swim as fast. They don't fight to the death. What did I say the first one were? Slower swimming, less active, tight schooling. Yeah. Males less aggressive. They share their territories more. Their territories can overlap more. They utilise the deep water a lot more. So red-fin blue-eyes in the wild, when the predator comes across, they just scatter. They use their speed to just go away. They don't anymore. They dive down deep and they hide. So they're now not fight and flight escapee. They dive and hide, which is quite a change in behaviour. And they often use that stealth and depth to avoid their predators. Like, I get a lot of birds coming to visit the ponds, yeah. And these ones accept flake food just so, they immediately, straight away, they were eating flake food. So that says to me that red-fin blue-eyes have probably been in captivity and subject to pond conditions far longer than any of us scientists knew. And maybe the hobby knows differently. That's okay, we're breeding them. When I presented this talk to Queensland, I made it sound like you can only breed red-fin blue-eyes in ponds. And I don't want to leave that thought with you guys. Let's move on though. Complete change of track. So that's the red-fin blue-eyes done. I've been busy with blue-eyes of all sorts for quite a long time. Many of you folks remember Ron Bowman? Yep. Great guy, really good eyes for observing. Pseudomugil gertrudii, the spotted blue eye, occurs in Queensland and Northern Territory and into Indonesia. Yeah, Aru Island. Yeah. And so he made this poster, and I'd love a copy because this is the only thing that I've got. It's digital and I can't actually read it. But Ron obviously observed that the spotted blue eye varied a lot on location. So I've started keeping gertrudii, and I'm going to take you on a journey up the Queensland coast. So I keep spotted blue eye Mission Beach, which is just south of Cairns, and Eddy Bay. So you'll notice, a typical spotted blue eye, but with a rounded dorsal, second dorsal, not long filaments, spots halfway up the fin. Just keep that in mind when we look at the others. These guys are just dead easy for me to breed. I throw them in a pond. It's not worth doing them any other way. So this is a maybe 750 diameter pond, about 500 deep. I drop 20 adults in and I leave them. They survive all year round in southeast Queensland, where I am. And I harvest a couple during the year and give them away to mates. I do have a bigger pond. This is a 2.1 metre pond and about half a metre deep. And that's where my Mission Beach blue eyes are. They haven't started breeding yet this year for me, but there's plenty in there to go. So that's a really simple way. And the bonus of doing it in ponds is, your frogs show up. I love me frogs. Moving further up the Queensland coast, There's this blue eye from the Lockhart River Iron Range area, which looks quite different to the Mission Beach types. Yeah, why is that? They breed in ponds just as easily as everything else. Moving further up the coast, up to the tip of Cape York, Chartreuse River and Blackwater. Whitefellas know this is Polo Creek. The locals up there don't like to call it Polo Creek because there's some bad connotations, so they call it the area just Blackwater. So we're calling this fish Blackwater. This one challenged me. Don't do that. Blackwater gives you a clue. Very low pH, very tannin stained water. I haven't been there personally, but the young fellow that collected them said that the fish are quite solitary, whereas spotted blue eyes are normally schooling fish and you'll get quite large groups. So I started with, I didn't ask for these, I got 2 males and 1 female, and I tried to breed them in an aquarium, and I got 5 eggs over a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months, and really struggled to get any sort of production. I managed to grow a couple, and then I thought, well, this is stupid. I rung up Josh, mate, where do these things live? What's it look like? Is the water deep? Is it tannin stained? As it sounds. Is there somewhere for them to spawn? I asked him all those questions about it. And he gave me his answers as best he could. So I tried one of my ponds. I filled it with rainwater. I loaded it up with lots of botanicals to drive the pH down as much as I could. So it was quite soft water, lower pH, and I got some breeding. So I knew that Gertrudii breed well in ponds, and you just throw them in and Bob's your uncle, away you go. But it didn't work, so I questioned what I knew, looked for new answers, and that's the result. Further down the western side of the Cape, sorry, let's go back a tad. So these guys are quite different. So these are the blackwaters again. Yellow pectoral fins, not particularly huge dorsal fins, much smaller spotting spread throughout. And then we're going the wrong way. Back down the western side of the Cape, I've got some Urim Creek Gertrudii. These are probably my favourite Gertrudii. Yellow pectorals, big fins, raggedy edges to the fins, which is atypical. Good spotting, they're a nice big fish, really easy to breed, throw them in a pond, away they go. So we're back to what we know. And then I'm parochial Queenslander. I know that spotted blue eyes occur in the Northern Territory, nobody cares. Sorry. But this guy is interesting. This is Aru, the one known as Aru 2. Have a look. You probably already know this. I'm probably telling you how to suck eggs. Why doesn't that work? See that hook on the anal fin? None of the other Gertrudii have that on the mainland. I'm not wanting to steal any thunder from the scientists that are researching these, and I know they're onto it, but I've just taken you on a journey of perhaps 3 or 4 different clades of spotted blue eye that will most likely be described as different species, and we won't have Gertrudii. Now, this is not a scientific fact. I'm not telling you anything that's been done. I know people are working on it. This is my guess at what will happen. It's likely something along those sort of lines will happen in the Northern Territory as well. So, can we get back to Blackwater to get more fish? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe the ones I've bred are all there are. So I've got to put 110% of effort into doing it. I've got to give some to some other people to share the load, to reduce the risk of losing them, because they're beautiful fish, because we might not be able to get them, and they might become threatened, or worse, endangered, the moment they're described. because they're quite isolated populations. So this now becomes back to my teenage years. This is just the regular Pacific blue eye. For me, I caught my first one in Moggle Creek, west of Brisbane. I was maybe 15 years old. That was it, I was sold. Spectacular little fish. I still keep these guys from the upper Maroochy River. They occur above a waterfall. They're quite interesting, but I think they're pretty typical signifer. The next one for me was honey blue eyes. So I joined Ang for Queensland in 1987. It started in 1985. And I met up with two fellas, John and Chris Marshall. And their dad was switched on enough to know that these things were different. He'd taken the boys up to the sunny coast and they'd caught some and put them in a pond in their backyard. They had this interesting theory that honey blue eyes spawned after lightning strikes. Well, we didn't know much about them then. It seemed as good as anything. I was fortunate enough to get some from them a number of years later, and I let them go in a pond that our bridesmaid's father had built at Kashmir. And here you go, have some of these, look after them. Not expecting anything to happen. And we went there 5 years ago. 4 years ago, yeah. And Brian goes, "Oh, your fish are still doing really, really good." Brian's 85 or 9, 87. He's getting a bit dirty, but your fish are doing great. And I said, "Yeah, right." And I went out there and he's still got these original blue eyes that I got from John and Chris Marshall. And you know how I said we managed to get redfin blue eyes allowed to be kept in the trade? I know you guys have had them down here, but we haven't been able to deal with them in Queensland. So talking to the ministers and the like, we got them allowed to be kept too. So I grabbed some and took them home. And I'm breeding heaps of these. You just chuck them in a pond and away you go. I'm sure you know this about honey blue eyes. You can do them in tanks, but it's really hard work compared to doing them in a pond. And they've got really good temperature tolerance. I think, Bridgie, you've got some?
No, it's just a little bit too cold.
Okay.
But other people have got them outdoors here.
Yeah. They're spawning at home already. My morning water temperatures were around 15 to 17 and they were spawning. So, yeah, they're good to go. So let's move on a bit. This is a young fella called Josh Lawler. He's a policeman on Cape York. He's young. He's like we were, Brooksy and Briggsy and I, when we were youngsters. He's mad keen. He's looking everywhere for blue eyes. We're living vicariously through him. We go, because he can run fast from crocodiles and we can't. He's finding amazing stuff. And there he's holding one of my stickers. That's one of my other activities in life. I'll show you that a bit later. Josh found a New Guinea blue eye living in Cape York. It was amazing. It's Palleticola, the swamp blue eye. That's it. Someone was asking me about a photo of it. Anyway, that's it. There's a photo by Maurice Monaghan of one of my fish. They're interesting fish. The information that Josh gave me is that they live in spring-fed, high hardness water behind the mangrove swamps in Cape York. So it's in very flat country, but if you go into the back of the mangrove swamps, you get shallow water flowing out of this limestoney little, I've got to call it a waterfall, just a chunk of rock that forms behind there. And it flows out, and that's where these guys live. So that's telling you something. We want high hardness. They probably like shallow water. They probably get inundated by salt water every now and then. So they've probably got a fairly high temperature tolerance as well, because when they're in shallow water, even on Cape York, the temperature can drop quite cold. So I'm not sure. Oh yeah. Getting them home was a challenge. I don't know how you guys go moving fish around, but we were trying to get Australia Post to send fish out of Weipa down to Esk, and one of our first shipments went from Weipa to Cairns, Cairns to Brisbane, Brisbane to the Gold Coast, Gold Coast to Brisbane, Brisbane to the Gold Coast, Gold Coast to Brisbane, Brisbane to Bundamba, Bundamba back to Brisbane, Bundamba to Esk. We got soup. We were pretty cranky. But anyway, at the Angler conference last year, I met up with Josh, and this is the way I transport fish when I'm taking a long time to go anywhere. It's like if, we were at Cairns for a couple of weeks, probably a week and a half after the conference before we got home. So these are just 10-litre water bottles. I fill them up halfway with the appropriate water. I've got a little spout in the filler that drops into the bottle. It stops the water sloshing out of the thing as we're driving, because I'm a pretty maniac driver. And they last for ages. So I brought them home, drip acclimated them in the water that Josh had told me was about 5 parts per thousand salt, and put them in an aquarium. So 5 to 7 parts per thousand salt water. But I don't just use salt to make my salt water. I use proper marine salts, which gives you not only the salinity but all the buffering and everything, all the minerals that you need in salt water. And that's a secret. That secret came from the Europeans. Wim Hiersmerk, just you're mad to do it any other way, he says. I know we use salt for treating sick fish. Straight salt, flossy salt is fine for that. But from an ecological point of view, in breeding a new species, try and match your salt water as much as you can to their wild habitat. So it's a tad expensive, but at 5 to 7 parts per thousand, it's not too bad at all. So I put them in a 3-foot aquarium. My fish room is not big. It's quite industrial looking. It's about 3 by 5 metres. I've got a couple of rows of tanks. I bought a ex-shop, rejigged all their tanks, but they're all a 40-gallon breeder, so 900 by 450 by 400 high, which is way too big for blue eyes, but I didn't really know what I was going to be breeding when I built the fish room, and I breed blue eyes in ponds, so it didn't matter. But I put the Pallidicola in a 3-foot tank with a bit of salt, and they started spawning straight away. Like, they're so easy, yeah. But hatching the eggs for me, that tedium of plucking eggs off a mop and then looking after them and everything, it just doesn't fit our lifestyle, because we've got a lot of strings in our bow on our farm. So I looked for an easier way of doing it. I took some inspiration. Blake's here somewhere. Blake made stuff for hatching CPDs, and I thought it was really clever. And then some of you native guys will know Gary Lang in the United States, and Gary Lang posted on one of the Facebook groups, what do people do for an egg tumbler for rainbow fish? I said, you don't need an egg tumbler for rainbow. Yes, you do. You need an egg tumbler for blue eyes. So this is my egg tumbler for my Pallidicola. So sits on the edge of the tank. I've got an airlift bringing air up. This is my egg holder. It just sits in the bottom with a weight to hold it down. So it pumps water into that. I don't know if you can see this. I think there's a better photo. But then it spills back in to this reservoir, and there's a hole there. It drops into the tank. So every morning I'd go down and pluck 20 or 30 eggs, drop them into this, and wait. Pallidicola take 3 weeks, maybe more, to hatch. So having the really good water flow keeps them well, keeps them fresh, not fungusing. When the babies hatch, they just automatically drop into the tank. And then I start feeding. So I think, yeah, this is the thing in operation. So that's a little weight that's holding the mop down, to holding the eggs. And there's a couple of eggs, and you can see the larvae wrapped around the egg, just waiting to hatch. I haven't got any photos of babies in particular. So that system's pretty simple, works. Thanks, Blake, you're an inspiration. Something that really blew me away though was that length of time that they take to hatch is annoying, and it's not fixed. So being a bit tight and using a lot of live food, I get a lot of muck in my fry raising tanks. So I siphon it out. And because I wanted to recycle the water, you know, it wasn't a big bio load, there was just a lot of muck on the bottom because I've paid for that salt, I'm not throwing it away. I siphon it into a bucket and let it settle. And that is what hatches from the muck off the bottom. So that's baby palleticola, the eggs had just been scattered on the bottom. And I've done this a heap of times now with these fish. It doesn't matter if I leave the tank for 6 weeks and I siphon the bottom, they hatch the following morning. So there's something about the disturbance of being sucked out of a siphon that just triggers them. So there's, is it a diapause? I've forgotten the right words for it. They're in some sort of stasis waiting for the right conditions. It kind of makes sense, behind the mangroves in this odd spring-fed environment that's probably not highly productive. They're probably waiting for a tide to come in and bring a whole bunch of plankton for them to feed off. So there's stuff to find out yet.
Do you think you could trick the hatch with a spike in salinity? Like just once you
Maybe.
The eggs, if you just add like an extra 2 spoons.
Sure. Remember, I'm an old bloke that told fibs to all the young people. You just try it. I mean, that's a great theory. Do it. Yeah.
Be a mechanical thing as well.
Yeah.
Like the act of them being.
Yeah.
Based off where they are, if there is if they're waiting for a trigger of salt water or a swell to come in, that's bring heat of salt water and also the movement as well.
Yeah. So, I'm a scientist. I'll propose this, but then I want someone to go and look. And the government won't fund it. You guys will. Fantastic. I'll make sure you get some. I probably should have done this in a bit different order. I want to say that there's a new Cyanidorsalis from Queensland as well. Oh, sorry, it's Cyanidorsalis, but newly found in Queensland. Does the same thing, but it lives in sort of similar habitats, so that makes sense. Righto, next challenge. You guys will all know about Luminatus. I'm sure lots of you guys breed lots of them. I can't. I don't know how to do it. I haven't got the patience or the skill to harvest eggs or something. But they're nice fish and they're worth doing. So that's my embryo fish room a couple of years ago, building it with the 3-foot tanks. I'm fully entrenched in blue eyes within a very short time, realising I need smaller tanks. So out they come and I weld some dividers in. Silicon. Yeah. So this is my Luminatus setup, or that's going to be my Luminatus setup. So get out the trusty egg tumbler thing. It's easy enough to get eggs from Luminatus. The hard bit is stopping them eating the eggs. So you pick them off, you drop them in there. So the Luminatus are in the other side of that tank. Sorry, I'm pointing in things you don't know. The adults are here, the eggs go into here, the fry are raised in there. The water's all the same. There's some sponge dividers in the back, so the water circulates through. So it's exactly the same water. I feed with plankton, so when I feed the babies, the adults get the same amount, and it works. It's hard work though for me. What I did that's the operation, the unit in operation for Luminatus. What I did discover for me is that if I put 2 males and 3 females out in March at the end of the year for 3 weeks in that pond that's just chock-a-block full of vegetation, and then I take the adults out and I wait a couple of weeks, I get a heap of babies. It's just easy. So you know that bit I said about make it easy on yourself? That's how I do my Luminatus now. I don't get lots, but I get enough for the next year and I can give a few away. This is the Cyanodorsalis that Josh Lawler discovered in Queensland, only known from the Northern Territory until he found them. It seems to be a little bit smaller. I don't really know. I've only had them a year. I'm not sure I've got them up to full size. These guys are dead easy. They follow the blue eye recipe. Close your eyes, throw them in a pond, away you go. My ponds are cut-off IBCs. They're about 500 litres. I put about 7 to 10 parts per thousand salt, so 7 to 10 grams per litre. That's a lot of salt in a pond that big. And then I just drop the adults in with one of my spawning mops, a little bit deeper now, Cyanodorsalis, because they often live in deeper water, especially the Northern Territory ones. They'll be in a couple of feet, half a metre. And then I sit this on the top. This is my substitute for all the floating plants that people use. It's a bait net on a bit of pipe that just floats on the top, and it provides habitat for the babies.
Wow.
It's dead simple. So keeping as many blue eyes as I do, I risk transferring species between ponds if I'm using plants, because you pull out a tub of val and think this is going to die, put it in there, and then you get something that's funky looking. I just throw these in the sun, let them dry, UV sterilises them, the eggs are gone, I can go again. So it does make life quite a bit easier for me to do it that way. I'm going to have a slag at some scientists here. Yeah, you're safe. You're one of the good guys. There's a fella called Jerry Allen who's very famous in the blue eye and rainbow fish world. And in the 80s, we're saying, Jerry, these signifer are different. The Ross River ones are different. The North Queensland, far North Queensland, Cape York ones are different. The ones down in Sydney are different, and there's these funky looking ones up the coast. No, they're all the same, just variation. I think Matt had a lot to do with identifying that these were different. Is that right?
You've done some of the genetics.
Yeah, anyway.
I have caught them in the guy.
Cool. That's where these came from. Yeah. This is the mangrove blue eye. When was it described? Last year, 2024, got its official name. Halophila means salt loving. It tends to be in much more salty areas. This is the habitat that Matt will recognise in Mackay. It's right in the mangrove.
Ditch behind the airport.
Oh, yeah, right, eh?
Oh yeah, very pristine, full of PFAS and other nutrients. Yeah.
So nighttime is a really good time for catching blue eyes in the wild because they have a sleep. So you can target the ones you want and pick them up. North Queensland has these things that turn humans into food. I think we call them crocodiles. So there's a road causeway across the front of this picture. And you notice there's a nice bright light. That's my dear wife keeping track of the crocodiles for me as I go down and collect some.
And was I in trouble for shining the light in his eye?
So for those who didn't see, Kathy was quite concerned. I don't know, maybe she wanted to see me get eaten, but the light was straight in my eyes. I can't see the crocodiles. You can't see anything. Anyway, we got these Halophila and brought them home. And they're an interesting fish. They are surprisingly hard to tell apart from Signifer in a tank. But they're quite different. Notice the more rounded fins, the slightly deeper body. The spangles are kind of different. The ray counts are different. And the way they breed is different. So we don't really know much about their biology yet. But I decided they were not unlike the Cyanodorsalis and they liked a bit of salt. So I loaded one of these cut-off IBCs with about 20 parts per thousand salt, a lot of salt, chucked them in. I grew nice, big, really big mangrove blue eyes and got no babies. Right, got to do something different. Back to the habitat, shallow. I'm going to try. So at night, they're all right here. And the babies are right on the edge in the really shallow water. And out here is a whole bunch of predatory things that's keeping them in there. During the daytime, it looks like the same sort of behaviour. So it looks like they're always in that shallow area. So with that in mind, I set up one of my koi mops floating really shallow and a bunch of this netting for the babies to hide in. And although I saw the fish in it, I got nothing. No babies. So reassessed, and I don't know if you can see, but under that is a similar sized tray, about that deep, that long, filled it up with gravel, slid it under the mop, put it on there, and I started to get babies. So I'm not sure if they are substrate spawners, and I don't mean like a cichlid is, I mean they drop their eggs into the substrate, or they may even bury some of their eggs into the substrate. So that sand layer underneath seems to have been enough to trigger some spawning. I haven't got heaps, but I've got enough to share them around Angford, Queensland, and I've got enough to try again this year with something different. Not
He actually only breeds his cynos on gravel. He doesn't have any mops in.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Righto. We heard about Ross River blue eyes. On our trip north, I decided I'd go and get some. This is one of Gunther Schmieder's. We heard about Gunther, one of his original photographs, and the article he wrote about them, calling them cheeky little buggers. This is his original photograph from the 90s, and they're spectacular. See the big round fins, the big tall dorsal, and they're amazing. So I hooked up with Peter Hume on the way back from the Angford Queensland conference last year and said, mate, take me to Ross River and we'll get some of these. And I brought some home in that trusty transport method, and this is them.
Good photo.
Thank you.
Go platinum with dark.
Yeah, shut up. I can't photograph fish in my room to save myself, but that is close enough to realise, have I got the right fish? Where are the round fins? You know, they're pointy. And, you know, they got big, they were active, they were flaring, but I was seeing the pointy fin, not the big round fin of the Gunther Schmieder photograph. So I enlisted the help of Jason Schulter, and I gave him a couple, and he used flash photography to nail it, and they're my fish that look just like Gunther's fish.
Those are your fish?
Yeah,
Those are
yeah.
Why do they look so different?
So you catch the moment.
Oh, when they lift their fins?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
So the camera stops the moment.
Oh, wow.
So I had, here's another one that Maurice Monaghan took of the same fish again. And they're spectacular, but every bit the fish that Gunther collected from the Ross River back in the 80s and 90s. I forgot what I was about to say. Oh, so I've got a tank, a 3-foot tank of these guys in a tiny little bit of salt water, maybe 2 or 3 parts per thousand, and they've grown really big. And I had some friends come to visit, fish friends. I was going to give them some facada because, you know, they're really spectacular long fish, and they wandered round to the facada tank. I said, yeah, what else you got going? Oh, have a look around there. And they looked at the Ross Rivers, and there's 30 fish going at 100 miles an hour, and they said, no, we don't want facada, we'll have them, please. They're incredible. So underrated, and just amazing fish, and they're really easy to breed. So I do the same IBC thing. A little bit of salt seems to help, but it's not much. I put the adults in a cage, I put mops in the cage. Every morning I lift the mops out, I don't bother picking eggs now, I just drop them in that, adults are in here. Mops go into this tray that's just floating in the water, same water. When the babies hatch, I just sink the tray, shoo them out, and then they hide in this bit and grow. So that's an idea of the cage. It's 3mm oyster mesh that you can buy. I use, once again, the trusty poly ring to provide a float. Ross River blue eyes jump, so I've got a fair height out of the water. And that's babies in an IBC. They're prolific, really prolific. You'll breed so many you can't give them away, but if you can set people up with 30 or 40 Ross River in a 40-gallon breeder, you won't see a display like it. Yeah. So, love them. This was just a bit of a wind-up about my mops. That's the brand I've been buying lately. This is what I'm setting up for my redfin blue eyes. So exactly the same setup, but with the mind that redfin blue eyes are quite territorial. I give each one a space. That's the mop. So the algae grows on the oyster mesh and creates 6 little compartments. Each male chooses a compartment. He can't see his competitors, so he's relaxed. He concentrates on breeding. The females find their way in, lay some eggs, maybe go find someone else to lay some more. Works really well. And I've got a bunch of these set up. So that's my current setup for redfin blue eyes. And that's my room. You can see it's quite industrial. It's certainly not as pretty as a lot. But I'm fully committed to blue eyes now. So instead of dividing my tanks in 2, I've now divided them in 3 so I can keep more space. I do all my stuff in ponds because I'm the laziest fish keeper. But I have to bring my fish inside for winter, so I needed more individual spots. So I just divided my tanks up into 3s. And that's my little blue eye corner. Yeah. And this is the secret to my success. This is a 2,000 litre pond of green water. And this is my harvesting device. That's the pond. You can see it's covered with mesh because I've had a hell of a bird problem for the last couple of years. I've had cormorants, I've had cranes, I've had kookaburras, I've had egrets, I've had spoonbills, and most recently I've had a night heron. We have a...
You forgot the water rat.
Yeah. Anyway, we have a native garden that we call a habitat garden. So we love having our animals and our frogs and everything, but I draw the line, don't eat my fish. So I've had to fence everything of where I keep fish. I've got bird netting over most everything. I've got chook mesh areas, big cages set up. And that's the reflections you can see in that pond just to keep the birdies out. But that's how thick my green water culture is. I use some wild water from a dam or pump up from our creek. We're fortunate to have a creek on our property. Put it in the dam, fertilise it with superphosphate and urea and bread flour. So the bread flour is now my substitute for the organic mix. If you guys know a fella called Dave Wilson, he uses the same recipe. It was invented by a fella called Bill Rutledge from the States, working with barramundi farmers in the Northern Territory. Anyway, it involves a fair bit of fertiliser, but you get really green water. And this is how I harvest the life out of it. So this is the, where am I? Pre-filter that you can buy. You can buy them in 50, 100 and 200 micron, which is a pretty small size. I like the 50 because it gets the smallest things. And that's, so I scoop an 4 litre ice cream bucket with a bit of water in, and then I swirl that net back and forth and empty it into the ice cream bucket a couple of times. I take it inside to my sink where I've got these filter screens of all different sizes, and that's actually a 50 micron screen, so it's pretty small. And that's the mix I get. My room has a microscope as well, which I use for diagnostic stuff. Some interesting things. We had a drought at Queensland in 2019 and our creek dried, and my cladocerans, the Daphnia, disappeared. So now I have copepods, which are those big guys, rotifers, and a bunch of tiny protozoans, which are really, really small and really good early feed for rainbow fish and early blue eyes. So I use those nets, those mesh screens, to sieve them to different sizes to feed to the size fish that I'm targeting. But let's hark back to, if you're doing the same thing over and over again and it's not working, change. This last year, I've had these guys show up. These are ostracods. I hate them. They were normally the sign of an end of my plankton culture. So I'd start this plankton culture and run it for at least 6 weeks, and often 12 or 16 weeks I'd get out of it. But eventually these guys would start to get lots of numbers. And I know the plankton culture's at an end. I restart. I dry the pond. I put a bit of ag lime in it to sort of absolutely make sure. I vacuum my ponds with a wet and dry vacuum cleaner to make sure they're completely dry. And then the ag lime sort of sterilises it a bit. This year, this bloody thing has been showing up after about a week or 2 weeks. They eat rainbow fish eggs. So my production's dived, and my ability to raise lots of fry has become really hard. I go cranky at my elders, and then I follow my own advice and I change what I'm doing, and I've swapped to brine shrimp.
Could you put some type of fish just inside your green water culture that would probably be big enough to feed off just the ostracods and not anything smaller?
Look, it's like putting a kid in a candy shop and tell him to only eat the must sticks. It ain't going to happen. Yeah, I haven't found anything that deals with it. We're suffering from a big ecological problem in our creek. It was the first time in its history of ever that it's dried so completely. We've changed the water regime, we've changed the seasonal cycle, we've changed the temperatures. Our forebears cleared all the vegetation, they've just wrecked the creek, yeah. And, you know, we say these things might have happened 100 years ago, but these effects are still happening a little bit by little bit. It's what non-fish keepers can't see. You know, we get it because we observe and see. Yeah.
And the stopgap measures don't do anything either.
No, exactly right.
Now, but they cause more problems in the long run.
Yeah, so I changed. I just changed. I'm not going to give up on the green water because it's fantastic. I can still filter everything out below 50 microns and feed my tiny fry and get them going to a point they can take Artemia. But the astronomical growth I got with the redfin blue eyes with this mix isn't happening at the moment. Yeah, so always looking for new ideas, always questioning everything you know, always looking in your community to see, you know, somebody's doing something clever, I'm going to give that a crack, or I'm going to modify what he's doing a little bit and try something again. It's a never give up. So, I gave a talk similar to this to Aim for Queensland, and I'm quite mild today in my scathing of my forebears that mucked up redfin blue eyes. I was much more, I don't know, I vented. But I left the group with the idea that redfin blue eyes are too hard, and that was wrong. That was not my intention. You know, I had a bit of a biff with someone at the 2017 ANCFA conference saying, you've got to do it in glass tanks. And I said, you can't do it in glass tanks, leave them alone. Do it in ponds, do it like we're going to try and do it. And we did it. But we now have commercial breeders in Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, maybe even South Australia. They're around, they're expensive, but they're available. So in the spirit of not listening to your elders, go out and get some and try and do them in glass tanks again. I wonder if I've got one last photo. There it is. Can you imagine this is a biotope for redfin blue eyes? This is their habitat. Ignore the fact that there's gambusia in it. The gambusia made the redfin blue eyes go extinct in this spring. It's the water rising up from under the ground, bubbling up through the carbonate and the calcium and just bubbling. It'd be so easy to recreate in a fish tank with the power head coming up under and bubbling it. It just wouldn't have to be carbonate. It could be sand, coral sand, anything like that.
Gravel filter.
Yeah,
First under gravel filter.
yeah, but you want to concentrate it to get this cool look. Yeah. And the plants don't really matter. The ones from out there are becoming available as well. So you could do that. You know, I can imagine a 3 foot 900 by 900 tank this deep. You might have success breeding redfin blue eyes. What about a 6 foot tank only filled up this much? Doing something like that. It's got to be possible. We just need you guys to adopt it. Be clever, try, see how it goes. So keep redfin blue eyes. They're worth saving. They're fantastic aquarium fish. Give them a go. And that's it. Don't forget.